In this particular forest area, you see it's very close between the houses here. This is the forest where I grew up. I mean, I didn't grow up in the forest, but this forest is very close to the house where I grew up. And what I remember from this forest is New Year's Eve, or actually New Year's Day. See, back in the time, people would use firecrackers, and fireworks freely. There were no regulations around those at that time, which meant that all people in these neighborhoods, they would throw firecrackers and use fireworks in this forest. And on New Year's Day, we kids, we would walk out in this area and we would try to find failed firecrackers or fireworks. And there were quite a few of them. It was winter after all, and people lifted the fuse and threw the firecrackers on the ground. And every now and then, of course, the fuse was put out. So there you had an almost working firecracker. Or sometimes, if you were real lucky, there were some fireworks with colors, color effects. So we would walk in this forest and try to get as many unused and unexploded firecrackers or fireworks as we could. And then we would bring them home. And if the fuse still was long enough to set it on fire, to light it safely, we would use them. And here's the trick. How do you do? Like if you have a very small fuse, well, you have to kind of use a very long match, basically, to not get your fingers blown off. I still have all my fingers, for the record. So you would light them on fire. The other way to have fun with them was like to break them apart, the firecrackers, in the middle, to expose the gunpowder, and then you would light the gunpowder on fire, and it would do this sound, and it would, like, we call it fräsa them in Swedish. I'm sure many of you of my generation have done this. So you get a short burst of fire, basically, from the gunpowder. So this happened, of course, New Year's Eve, but also Walpurgis night. I think it's a German tradition from the beginning, Walpurgis, where you light a big bonfire to scare away witches and the devil and evil creatures. I think, in hindsight, it's just an excuse for having a nice party. So, still to this very day, lots of people in Sweden light bonfires and celebrate Valborg or Walpurgis. And most families have their own traditions for this event. I told you I used to have a dog as a kid, and this is also a path that I walked in the forest with my dog. I used to visit my grandmother and grandfather, who lived kind of close, maybe 1 or 2 kilometers from my childhood home. And they would sometimes take care of the dog. So many things have changed here in this area. Naturally, of course, things change. Trees fall down and people put solar cells, solar panels on their houses, which were kind of non-existent in the 80s. I mean, the technology was there. I remember having a calculator which was solar powered, but I mean utilizing them for heating the house, yeah, that just wasn't a thing back then in the 80s. Another thing I remember is that, I mean, we used to play here as children. My classmates and I were here in the forest, and what happened with everybody? I think that is a common thing for people from small communities. Many move away as adults and they start their own lives in different places. I remember the guy whose father ran a very successful local company, and he still runs it to this very day. Everybody in this area probably knows who I'm talking about. Hint, property development, tractors and stuff. Another guy who was and still is friend. He started off as a journalist. Actually, I think he started out on the economy program and wanted to be like an accountant, but I think he was bored as hell. He played in a metal band. And now he is kind of a celebrity in the Swedish metal scene. Another guy, I think he wanted to be a goldsmith. He ended up to be a tattoo artist. Yet another guy from that very same class. Can't actually remember. I think he became kind of a sailor and worked on big offshore ships, like oil platforms, floating oil platforms. He was the guy who introduced me to the Amiga. So, if you remember me, thank you so much for introducing me to the Amiga. I think it's a common thing to think about what happened to people. Where did they choose to live? What did they choose to work with? We just have a little short bit left until we reach the street. So I think this is a good place to wrap this up. Whatever your role was in school, whatever your fate was, you have always the opportunity to be bad. be bad whenever you can. See you in another video.